Okay, this is going to be my first foray into doing a recording and posting my notes online for you guys. This way you can play it back and forth, you can stop and pause and write things down. For this one, there's a sheet that I have for you where you are going to write in the definition or the topic or basically the identification, the ID of um, what we're doing here, and there'll be about 4 or 5 different things that you need to actually do and write down the information that you need to know. On the screen here, we're going to be talking about the era of Jacksonian democracy. You have Andrew Jackson on the left here. We've been doing our dossier project to kind of get an idea of who he was before the election and what happened during the election, and we're going to give you a little more background on what happens after that here and give you some more details on Andrew Jackson as president. Over on the right, I have Andrew Jackson doing a speech to people because during this era, Andrew Jackson becomes a monumental figure. He becomes really big, and people really respond to him. He's one of the first people that really are able to tap into Americans and get people to vote for him and support him. Yes, Washington and those guys did, but Jackson has a key where he is able to just tap into the American psyche and make them do the things that politicians want them to do. First thing, after Andrew Jackson wins, because remember, thinking backwards, we looked at the stuff about the election. Andrew Jackson technically won that election if you were to just count electoral votes and popular votes, but he never gets the magic number, which was 131. So he never receives the total number of votes. They spend 4 years where John Quincy Adams is in the White House and Jackson just bashes him for 4 years. And then they go back to the polls again. Andrew Jackson runs again, and this time just totally clobbers John Quincy Adams. So after he's done, Andrew Jackson does something remarkable. He actually opens the White House to anyone who wants to come. Anybody, anywhere, is allowed to come to the White House and party with the president. Remember, the president is supposed to be a man of the people, and he opens the doors. I mean, this is not something we can think of today. The president is behind all kinds of security and all that stuff, so this is huge. He wins, opens the door for anybody who wants to come, and it ends up being a massive party. Because when you think about it, Jackson probably doesn't even know who half the people are in the White House. So he has this very large party. There's lots of drinking, lots of partying. Down here, there's a picture of a giant piece of cheese, which has become this huge piece of lore or legend now, where people hear about this giant piece of cheese where Americans came, they shake off a giant chunk. It's supposed to be one of these large pieces of largest things in the nation, and people are all participating, and they were just trying to feed everybody. The one up, the picture above on the top left, I think really shows how wild and crazy this really was. So remember, on your sheet, you're putting down information about this, and you are drawing a little picture to help signify to yourself what exactly is going on here. And if you need to, take a pause at the video and continue on. The next huge thing, it's another definition that will come up in some of the readings, and that is called the spoils system. The definition of this is basically Jackson believed in rewarding those who helped him get elected by giving them jobs all over the country. Remember, Andrew Jackson gets people to vote for him, and lots of people voted for him thinking, I helped you get elected, now you got to help me. I'm going to scratch your back, now you have to scratch mine. And Jackson does this. He gives jobs to people who need them. This is very popular. These are good jobs. Remember, this is an era where people who, your options are, if you're a regular working person, your options are like farmer, maybe working in a factory of some sort. Those are growing in prestige and appearance. There's merchants, but a lot of those jobs are not all that readily available, and you have to have money to be a merchant before you really, to buy things and before you can sell them. So if you get a government job, these are really good jobs. And if you're Jackson's friend and you can write a letter that says, "Hey, Mr. Jackson, I helped you. I ran such and such campaigns here for you. I did all these things." And this is not based on merit. Merit is where people, you're actually qualified to do the job. So in this case, Jackson, you're like, "Hey, you're my friend. I did this for you." Jackson says, "Okay, I can find evidence of you really doing these things, and I'll give you this job." That has no, you could be the most unqualified person ever. And I have the um, little thing down here. This is President Grant, and he had kind of the same idea. This idea of the spoil system gets used for a very long period of time, and really doesn't really get taken on until President Garfield. So if you look up at the top of the classroom there, you can see where President Garfield is right next to President Jackson, and there's a long, big span of people in between there. I mean, not all of them, did this, but a lot of them did. You hired the people that were your friends or helped you, and in this case, President Grant is giving out government cake, and everybody's asking for a piece, and he feels being torn in all these different directions, and it's not really working for him. And in the end, he ended up having to apologize for his administration, so that did not work very well for him. The next thing that's another term that's used here is the kitchen cabinet. The cabinet positions have to be approved by Congress. So, you usually put people in there who are qualified, and if Congress doesn't like them or doesn't think that they are qualified, they will say no. They will not approve them. And so Jackson put in the people that he had to put in that had to be approved by Congress. However, he creates a second cabinet. These are his friends. These are people who really listen to him, people that he listens to. These are people he values their opinion. The first cabinet, he really doesn't care what they have to say. He talks to them some simply because he has to. You have to fill those positions. He does understand tradition, but remember, Jackson only does things his way. So in this case, Jackson creates a second cabinet, and these people are not approved by the Senate. He took advice from them more often than the real cabinet, and these people in the newspapers and that come to be called the kitchen cabinet, because this is like the president's private group, and they're kind of making fun of them being the kitchen cabinet versus the regular cabinet. And today it seems kind of silly that today we would call them the kitchen cabinet, but it's appropriate. The two-party political system finally kind of emerges here. Remember, we talked about the Federalists. They died out. I mean, remember, if the War of 1812 happens, they're gone after that, because they are talking about secession, they are talking about treason, they are talking about the war is terrible, and in the end, Andrew Jackson comes out of the War of 1812 a hero. James Madison comes out looking rather awesome, even though, yeah, technically the White House got burned and all these terrible things did happen, but we did defeat the British in several places. Jackson's group totally defeats the British. You should have noticed that when you watched the other video. And now you really get the political system really starts to take shape. You have the founding fathers are gone. They're no longer really part of this. Most of these guys, if they participated in the revolution, they were young. Like Jackson, remember, he participates in the revolution as a courier, and he is only like 13 years old during all of this time. Maybe a little longer. Time goes on, he gets older, obviously, but that main story of him getting cut, he's only like 13 years old. So he's not in the battles. He's not like George Washington making decisions and things like that. He's just kind of part of it. So that whole era is gone, and now you get a whole new group of people. And during this time period, they shortened the Democratic-Republican name to just the Democrats. Jackson's party changes their name to only the Democrats. This is the exact same party that is the party of President Obama right now. So this party, this is where it really forms, and we say this is where it starts. Technically, can they all trace their roots back to Thomas Jefferson? Sure. Can they really all trace their roots back, to some of these other ideas, maybe from the Federalists? Yeah, sure. But for the most part, this is where we say the modern Democratic Party really takes shape. Now, it's going to be a while before we get the Republicans. It's going to be until we get to Abraham Lincoln for the Republican Party to take shape. So at this point, the other party is the party that are called the Whigs, um, WHIG. And basically, this party becomes the party of people who hate Andrew Jackson. Now, this is convenient for the 1820s, for the time period in the early 1830s, when Jackson is actually the president. But over time, this is not going to work very well when your whole party platform, for the most part, are people who do not like Andrew Jackson. Because when Andrew Jackson is gone, what does your party fight for anymore? And people have a hard time figuring that out after this is over, but we'll get to that more later. And the first really huge political strategist, I mean, you have to admire him in some ways, is Martin Van Buren. And he convinces them. This is where you start getting people say, you know what, I'm a Democrat. I will always vote Democrat. It doesn't matter whatever else happens. This is my party. This is who I'm going to vote for. And this is what I'm going to vote for all the time. And Martin Van Buren's the one who starts setting this system. He's the one who becomes Jackson's campaign manager. They call him the little magician simply because he can get people elected. He's not a man of high caliber character. He doesn't care about all that stuff. But he is really good at making sure people get elected. I mean, we have people like this today where their whole job is just you tell the candidate, hey, if you say these things, people will vote for you. He sets up things like train rides. They start setting up campaign events. They start setting up using signage and buttons and all of that kind of stuff, posters. All of these things that we just take for granted now, this is where it starts. It starts to take a more modern shape. And, we can argue about if this is good or bad for the nation, but this is the first time you really get people, ordinary people, involved in the election. If you remember, this is the first time you get a lot of people who just vote for Andrew Jackson. People who are regular farmers. This is who they vote for. And they expand the right to vote, letting more people vote. And if that's the way it's going to be, then you need to try to convince these people to actually vote for you. And that's where the little magician or Martin Van Buren comes into play here. And that is the end of the slideshow. So if you need to play it again, go right ahead. If not, move on to the next activity.